Thank you so much for coming. So today we have with us Mr. Gordon Korman, and he will sign. He will be signing after. So if you brought your own book, or if you'd like to purchase a book, they're $8.50. So if you brought money, you can purchase the book after if you haven't bought one yet, okay? And then you'll just come up here and sign, and then we'll walk you back. So team teachers, you can leave the kids that are signing with us. We'll get them back to school, don't worry, okay? So let me just quickly introduce Mr. Korman to you. Mr. Korman is the author of over 85 young adult books. He wrote his first one in middle school, which is pretty cool if you think about it, in 7th grade. Interesting. All right, so this is Mr. Korman, and I'll send it over to him.
So, thank you guys so much for inviting me to, Connecticut and Manchester, and I guess this is not your school, but you will be here very, very soon. One of the reasons why I get picked, I think, to do a lot of these kinds of presentations at school is I wrote my first book in middle school. It was actually my 7th grade English project. Okay, true story. In my middle school, get this, the track coach had to teach English, and that was honestly because they ran out of English teachers and they had extra track coaches, and they just needed somebody there, right? So we got him, nice guy, good teacher, but at the time, he had never taught, English language arts in his life. And when it came to writing, he just sort of didn't know what to tell us to do, and he drew a blank. And he stood there saying, okay, work on whatever you want for the rest of the year. It was February. So from February to June, we had a class period every single day to write one story. And I got into it. I started taking it home, working on it at night, and that's how I wrote my first book, which was called This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. Oh, you know what grade I got? B+. How lame is that? They gave me A+, but they deducted 1 grade for messiness, right? It was the 70s. I wrote the whole thing in cursive on one of those old school marble notebooks. I got it published. I was the class monitor for Scholastic book orders. Like back in the 70s, they used to let a kid run the whole thing. I mailed my book to the address on the book order forms. Right? You're kind of looking at me like, wait, that works? I got lucky. The guy at Scholastic who opened up my packet found my book. I mean, I didn't send in the marble notebook. Truth, my mom had to type it for me. But he read that, liked it, gave it to his boss. She liked it, and a few days after my 13th birthday, so I started 8th grade, at that point, I signed a contract for my first book. It still took like a year to come out. My book business is pretty slow, but there I was. I was 14, right? I was a freshman in high school, and I had this book out. Guys, I'm 52. Quarters of my life ago, right? That book has been out for 38 years. It's been in, other countries, other languages, French, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Italian, Korean, Dutch, and Greek. Isn't that wild? To see your 7th grade project in Norwegian or like Dutch. I love looking at my books in other languages. You probably don't know the super old stuff. Okay, McDonald Hall is a school. So the principal is a guy named Mr. Sturgeon, and his nickname behind his back, everybody calls him the fish. Well, in French, he becomes Monsieur Sturgeon, and his nickname becomes Caviar, which is not a translation, right? I mean, caviar is not fish, it's fish egg. That's if it translates at all. I wrote this one book for little kids, okay, called Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire. So when Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire was done in French, the book translated okay, but how do you translate the title, right? Because Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire is an expression, and stuff like that is really hard to translate since you're not sort of saying what you mean in the first place. My translator told me to put liar, liar, pants on fire, word for word into French would be like calling a book, teller of untruths, your trousers have combusted. And that sort of blew me back a little bit, but I knew this guy who worked for Pepsi, and he was like, that's nothing. Remember a few years back, there was a Pepsi ad on TV, and the big slogan was, come alive with the Pepsi generation. Well, supposedly, when they translated that into Chinese, it actually turned out to say, Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. So I don't feel so bad about my little liar. It's just not a slam dunk to translate stuff. Like, some of you might know my book, Ungifted. Right? So it was just done in Spanish. And I figured, well, the title should be easy, right? Because it's just one word. You translate Ungifted into Spanish, and that's what you call it. Guess what? Turns out there is no word in the entire Spanish language that means ungifted exactly the way I use it. You know, like a regular, average, not gifted kid who kind of gets sent by accident to the super genius gifted academy. I'll tell you where I got the idea. The town I live in, outside New York City, the high school is really into robotics, right? Like they design and build these robots, enter these contests with them. Supposedly they're great. You know, they really win a lot. So I went in there to meet the robotics team. Some of these kids are just ridiculously smart. I mean, they can think in computer code, and they can do all the robotics and the pneumatics and the hydraulics. They can make everything kind of work together. Then they introduced me to this other guy on the team, Kenny, right? You know what Kenny's entire role was on the robotics team? He was in charge of going on the internet and finding like cool pictures to download and paste on the side of the robot to make it look nice. So I pulled the guy aside, and I was like, no offense, it doesn't seem to me that Kenny's job is quite as crucial as what a lot of these other kids do. And the teacher got real defensive, like, oh no, we can't lose Kenny. Turns out the robot drives with a joystick, like from video games, right? But none of the real robotics geniuses play video games, so they're not good at it, right? But Kenny is a total video game addicted couch potato. He is awesome with this joystick. And it made me think, okay, you got all this brain power over here to design and build the ultimate robot, but you really can't make it go unless you've got your video game head to run your joystick. It's almost like we're all gifted in our own weird way. Might not be what the school calls gifted, right? We've all got something. Great idea, right? How are you going to put it in another language? And I remember when my Spanish ungifted came, I opened up the box, expecting to see a one-word title. You know what the book is called? El Chico de lo Más Normal, which I believe means a guy who is nothing more than normal, right? Like nothing more than normal is the closest you can get to ungifted in not just Spanish, but a lot of different languages. Do any of you guys know the 39 Clues series? So it's not all mine, but I'm also one of the 39 Clues writers. So every 39 Clues book takes place in a different part of the world. Book 8, The Emperor's Code, is China. So there's a character in 39 Clues named Jonah Wizard, who's sort of a, like a celebrity rapper type, calls himself the Wiz. So his big slogan is, live large with the Wiz generation. But they have to translate it for the Chinese market, and it actually turns out to mean, Jonah Wizard makes your ancestors fat. Well, you know what? That is exactly what happens when you try to translate an expression. Like, live large We know what that means because it's our expression. But if you put that into any other language, you're really just translating a bunch of random words. Live, large, generations. Not gonna make any sense. Now, I wrote that first book for school. You know why I wrote the second book, honestly? I just sort of wanted to prove it wasn't a fluke, right? Like I could do it again. And it kind of turned into a hobby, and it went from, project to hobby to summer job, and eventually my real job. At the beginning, I was really close in age to my characters and my readers, so I relied on a lot of experience. But as I got older, that didn't work so well anymore, especially when I started writing about stuff that was outside my experience, right? My adventure series, especially, like Island, Everest, Titanic. I mean, no one alive has Titanic experience, so I had to replace the experience I didn't have with research. Like when the Titanic sank, there were 2,223 passengers and crew aboard. You know how many people got rescued? 706. So more than 2/3 of the people on the Titanic didn't make it, right? That's a pretty simple piece of research, right? I mean, if you've got internet, how long would it take to learn that? Like 30 seconds, And yet, everything in the Titanic story is influenced by those numbers. Day one, the ship hasn't even left the dock yet. If I'm writing a scene where 3 people are just getting their suitcases loaded aboard, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is nice, this is lovely, sun is shining, birds are tweeting. A few days from now, 2 of these 3 wonderful people are probably going to be dead, right? Which 2? Who lives? Who dies? And you get that from 30 seconds of doing research. That's kind of the power of it. There is stuff like that all over the Titanic story. Like, they loaded the lifeboats from the top deck. Problem was, did they have enough lifeboats? No. So hundreds of people are just stranded up there, and there's really nothing for them to do but watch as the water gets kind of higher, which really means the boat is getting lower. And eventually it sort of gets closer and closer, and they're washed off the top deck. Now, at the base of the first smokestack, right, Titanic has 4, there was this ginormous ventilator shaft. So the water starts pouring into the ship through that with such incredible force that all these people are driven underwater and kind of smashed up against this big grating. And guys, they're struggling like mad, right? They're trying to swim back up to the surface, but they can't, right? Because tens of thousands of gallons per second are pouring in over you, right? You are just pinned there. Every single one of those people is about to drown, okay? You know what happened? At that very moment, deep within the ship, one of the big boilers, right, like the furnaces, explodes. And it creates this huge cloud of steam that shoots up through the Titanic, blasts these guys up off the grating, propels them like torpedoes all the way up to the surface, and a bunch of them made it onto lifeboats and survived. Okay? I don't care how creative you are, nobody's gonna make that up. Like, that is the kind of thing that can only come from doing research. And in Titanic, like, that was only half the research, in a way, the sinking and the details, because the ship sailed in 1912, okay? And the world was really pretty different then than it is now. Like, most of my books take place today. I don't have to research what life is like in 2016, right? I look out the window. I mean, if I want to find out what kids are like today, I just got to hang out with you guys, or my own kids. I have a 17-year-old son, a 14-year-old daughter, and a younger son who's 10, right? I watch them with their friends all the time, just to find, I don't know, like little stuff, like how they dress, how they act, how they talk. Like dialogue is super important. I'm sure you've noticed just reading stuff, different characters say the same stuff differently, right? And it tells you about their personality. Even something as simple as, how does a character say hello, right? Does he say hi? Does he say, yo? Does he say, what's up? Or, how you doing? How are you? I went to high school with this kid. Honestly, for 4 years, he never once used the word hello. He always used to say, greetings. I mean, exactly like that too, you know. Phone rings, hello, brief pause, greetings. Well, none of you guys know my friend, okay? Don't you have a feeling in the back of your mind for just the kind of doofus we're talking about because of one word? Well, if you can get that much personality out of a word, think how much you can get out of like dialogue, all of it, right? The FBI says no two fingerprints are alike. Well, I think characters have almost like dialogue fingerprints, right? Like the little words they use, not so much what they say, how they say it. It's awesome for creating characters if you're writing a story that takes place today. If you're writing historical fiction, it's just trickier because you got to make sure that people at that time talk the way you've got them talking, right? The Titanic, for sure. In 1912, nobody talked like we do today, right? You can't have, you know, characters on the Titanic saying, dude, the boat's sinking. What's up with that? Legit, that water's mad cold. Because in 1912, nobody would have said, legit, that water's mad cold, right? That's how my 17-year-old talks. What would they say back then? Well, you can find out, but you gotta do research. Supposedly, there's one moment in the sinking where one guy turned to the guy next to him and said, it would appear that we are in rather a tight corner. I was like, really? A tight corner? That's it? You know, like you just found out that you're about to sink into 28-degree water. That kind of blows my mind, that the water the Titanic sank in was actually colder than ice. The only thing that kept it from freezing was like the salt content, right? You got like a 98% chance of being dead in the next few hours, and the best you can come up with is, oh, we're in a tight corner. But that says everything about people in 1912, if you think about it, right? Like they understated everything. We're the opposite today. We overstate everything. We go, you know, like totally gaga over, you know, oh, Justin Bieber's latest tweet says blah, blah, blah. But people weren't always that way. You know, 4 years ago, people could be really kind of cool, calm, and collected about near certain death. Now, look, we all do research, whether we call it that or not. Like, my older son is a big video game kid. So he loves to go on the internet and find cheats for his game, right? Well, that's research, right? I mean, anytime you use the resources at your fingertips to find information you need to do something better, you're researching. I mean, when I research my books, I'm just looking for, I guess you'd call them like informational cheats, stuff I need to know that will help me write a better book. I love it. I love doing research. You can't always do it. I mean, not every book can be researched, especially if it's like fantasy or sort of supernatural. I keep thinking, like if J.R.R. Tolkien was writing The Lord of the Rings today, and he went on the internet and tried to Google elves, like, would he find anything he could use? No, right? I mean, you can't research it the way you research the Titanic. I had a series called The Hypnotist, okay? And hypnotism is real, but the kind of hypnotism that Jackson Opus is capable of is a paranormal ability, cannot be researched. You're making the rules. Now, just because you make the rules doesn't mean you don't have to follow them, right? You can't have hypnotism work one way on page 20 and then a different way on page 90, you know? Okay, the eyes are the delivery system for hypnotic power. If I hypnotize you, I have to make eye contact with you. If you're looking the other way and I miss you and make eye contact with the person behind you, he's the one who gets hypnotized. At one point in hypnotism, hypnotist, Jax is trying to hypnotize the head cheerleader in the cafeteria line, right? And he misses her and hypnotizes the person in the line of sight directly behind her. Turns out it's the lunch lady in the food service line, right? So his friend's really into it. He's like, what are we gonna make her do? Just to test it, right? You know, if Jack says, like, bark like a dog, you know, will she do it? Or climb up on the salad bar and tap dance. They don't want this poor lady to get fired, though, for like erratic behavior. So they come up with an idea. Make her do something that's part of her job anyway, right? She never puts enough gravy on the mashed potatoes. Make her give me a decent amount. So, you know, Jack sidles up to the lunch lady. My friend here likes a lot of gravy. Make sure you give him as much as you can. Well, think about the exact wording of that hypnotic command. Give him as much as you can. Remember, when you're hypnotized, you don't do what you think the person meant. You do exactly as you were told, right? So the lunch lady takes the ginormous gravy tub, unhooks it from the food service station, and follows this kid all around the cafeteria, dumping scoop after scoop onto his tray. And when the tray is totally swamped and gravy is pouring over the sides, does she stop? No, because that's not included in as much as you can. Look, that's obviously a funny way things can go off the rails, but hypnotism is mind control. Like, that's got a real dark side, especially for a guy like Jax, who is so powerful that he can actually record a video of himself, and just seeing the video will hypnotize people. What if he records a clip telling people who to vote for president in the election? If that clip is encrypted into a computer virus that's spread over the internet, and then 20 or 30 million people see the clip, get hypnotized, and vote for the wrong guy, then a middle school kid could actually choose who the next president is going to be, right? Actually kind of change history. And that turned out to be the best part of the story, in my opinion, was, writing about hypnotists, you get a sense of what you think the cool part will be, right? You can make anybody do anything you want them to. I thought that's awesome. I mean, you fail a test, no problem. You hypnotize your teacher, make her give you an A. Or you don't like Brussels sprouts, no problem. You hypnotize your dad and get him to chuck the Brussels sprout. But what turned out to be way more interesting than that was, okay, you can do anything. You can make anybody do anything. Where do you draw the line? What is too far for you? That was what I really loved about writing Hypnotist. You know, I love that about my job too, that you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. I have an old book called The Chicken Doesn't Skate. And I got the idea from a school visit. Principal's giving me a tour of the school. And as we pass the science room, the door's open, I look inside, and there's a chicken, like a live chicken in their science room. So turns out it's a school experiment. They would take this baby chick, raise it in class. Believe it or not, it only takes like 4 months for a chicken to go from unhatched egg to fully grown hen. And then the plan was, when this chicken was fully grown, they were going to, get this, kill it, cook it, and eat it. Now, I'm not saying the teacher whips out an axe one day and starts chasing this chicken around the lab. But guys, they were 100% serious. When the chicken was fully grown, I mean, they wouldn't kill it themselves, but they would take it to a butcher shop, comes back cutlets, cook them up, and every kid who helped raise the chicken would get a couple of bites of their chicken, right? And listening to that story, I'm like, I've got to write a book about this, right? Remember, I was only at this school one day, so I don't see how it turns out, but you see the fireworks ahead. Well, that feeling of fireworks ahead, that's what tells you this is a story you gotta write. The fireworks can come from real life, but they don't have to, right? One of the things I love about being a part of 39 Clues, our book one was written by, you know, Rick Riordan is, right? The Percy Jackson author. So Rick, I think, has the most amazing radar for those fireworks of anybody I've ever met. You know what his job was before books? He taught middle school. You know what his favorite thing to teach was? Greek mythology. He thought it was cool. Mythology was the fireworks for Rick. But see, that's a great lesson for writers just because we all have something that is as cool to us as mythology is to him. I'll give you an example from my own writing. I love old movies. So one of my favorite kind of old movies are just these good old-fashioned robberies, you know, like the bank job or the jewel heist. So I wanted to write something like that. I'm very much a what-if guy. But to me, the idea is always a what-if, right? What if the ungifted kid ended up in the gifted school? What if the 12-year-old discovered he was suddenly the most powerful hypnotist in human history? So if you ever get writer's block, just ask yourself, okay, what are the what-ifs of my story? And the what-if I came up with for this robbery thing, what if they're not stealing something, they're stealing it back, right? They're stealing back something that is rightfully theirs to begin. And that's where I got the idea for a book called Swindle, right? Kid finds this old baseball card, takes it to a collector to see if it's valuable. The guy totally rips him off. I mean, lies, says it's worthless, buys it cheap. Turns out this card is worth literally $1 million. It is the second most valuable old baseball card in history. Does anyone know what number one is, by the way? You ever heard the name Honus Wagner? Yeah. So Honus Wagner played in 1909, and back then, kids didn't collect baseball cards, adults did, so they actually sold them in cartons of cigarettes, right? And Honus Wagner was really anti-smoking in 1909, which is kind of amazing because like no one knew any of the bad stuff about it back then, but he refused to allow his card to be sold with cigarettes. Fast forward 100 years, it's the rarest card in the world. In fact, there are only 6 or 7 of them anywhere, and one of them is like in nearly perfect condition. So the last time that card was sold, the mint one, it actually went at an auction for more than $2 million. Okay, so it is possible for super rare cards to be worth this kind of money. Problem with the swindle card is those kids, they just don't have it anymore, right? They sold it for peanuts to this sleazy guy. The only way to get it back is to steal it back. There are now, Swindle's a series now, so there are 7 books, number 8 on the way, and if you really think about them, they're just old movie plots, right? Like Swindle's a robbery, Zoo Break's a prison break, Framed is the wrong man, Hideout is like a fugitive story. If you ever get a chance, in school, let's say, to pick your own topic for writing. Always pick something you like, because you're going to do a better job if you're writing what you're psyched about. Like Rick and mythology, or me and these old movie stories. Right? Last thing you want to be writing is just bored. If you're bored writing, you write bored. But my newest series is called Masterminds. It started with like a kind of a what if. It was, what if kids with the perfect life suddenly discovered everything they thought they knew about themselves was a lie? Right? They live in this tiny town, Serenity, New Mexico, population 185. Get this, there are more than double the people in this auditorium than the entire population of Serenity. And yet, this tiny, nothing, nowhere town was voted #1 for quality of life. Everyone lives in practically a mansion. They've got like pools and their own basketball courts. There's no crime in Serenity, like zero. People in this town are so good, they don't even lie. The town motto is honesty, harmony, and contentment. And kids in Serenity actually go to contentment class, the way you guys take math and science. But there is a deep, dark secret to Serenity, and this is it. The town doesn't exist, right? There is no such place as Serenity, New Mexico. The entire community is a front for this pretty twisted experiment called Project Osiris. I mean, the idea of Osiris isn't that twisted. It's just, let's find out what makes you the kind of person you are, right? Is it your nature? Right? Is it something inside you, something fixed? Or is it nurture? Is it, the people you meet and the experiences you have and the family you grow up with? So here's the experiment. If we take evil people and give them the perfect life, right? Raise them in the perfect town, they learn nothing about war or crime or fighting or violence. They barely even heard of those words. Will they still grow up evil because that's their nature? Or will they grow up good because that's how we've nurtured them to be? Now, if you're going to do an experiment like that, you have to start it from the very beginning. In other words, what you need, if you think about it, is evil babies? Well, where do you get evil babies? The kid last week, like, dude, take my baby brother. He's totally evil. Well, you can't look at a tiny infant and know whether it's evil or not. So here's where Osiris gets a little bit twisted. They make their own evil babies by cloning them from evil adults. So they go to the prison system and they find the worst criminal masterminds doing time anywhere. We're talking murderers and gangsters and bank robbers and kidnappers, like the worst of the worst. Take little DNA samples, clone them in a lab. 9 months later, these infants are born. They look like any other baby, but they are exact genetic copies of some of the worst people ever. That's who the masterminds kids turn out to be. They were never supposed to learn the truth about themselves. It's a pretty big shock, right? First of all, just to discover that your whole life is an experiment. But worse, the people you thought were your mom and dad are actually scientists who've been studying you since the day you were born. But what's even worse than that is you're an exact copy of some of the worst human beings ever to walk the earth. And they decide, like, guys, we got no life. We have got to escape Project Osiris. Very hard to escape from Serenity. There's an invisible barrier around it. But they've got something on their side, which is they're masterminds, right? The people they're cloned from are horrible, but they're pretty smart, they're pretty inventive, they're extremely resourceful, and they get away. And my latest book is called Masterminds Criminal Destiny, the second book in the series. And it follows them after they've escaped Serenity, and Project Osiris is chasing them. And their other big problem is these kids are totally clueless about the real world. I mean, they grew up in a place so tiny, none of them has even seen a stoplight before. Their education is really worthless because they never learned about anything bad. Teachers, how would you teach American history in Serenity, right? I mean, we live in a country that started with what? A revolution and a war. Well, these are all things the Serenity kids were not allowed to learn about. If you go on the internet in Serenity and Google the Boston Tea Party, you know what comes up? In 1773, American colonists met with the British to discuss splitting off a separate country. Tea was served. Does anyone here think that they call it the Boston Tea Party because of the beverage service? You know, they do have a plan, which is, okay, they know human cloning is illegal, so they figure they'll just go to the police and report Project Osiris. But they kind of can't get that right either because they don't know anything about police. So the cop they approach is actually a traffic cop in the middle of this big intersection, blowing on a whistle and like waving cars through. I mean, they've never even seen traffic. So Amber, the girl who talks to him, she, first of all, steps out in front of all these speeding cars and almost causes an 18-car pileup. But when she gets to the guy, what's she gonna say? Officer, I want to report a crime. What crime, miss? Human cloning. I mean, they don't get a lot of human cloning in the traffic department. The guy thinks she's nuts, okay? Arrests her for her own protection. Now they gotta break her out of custody. They're taking her to the, see a psychiatrist. She's got a police escort, but it's a guy, right? So all she has to do is use the bathroom. He'll have to wait outside. And they'll be hiding in the bathroom. Now, it's a third floor bathroom, but they got one of those old-fashioned fire hoses, and they'll just use that to climb out of the building. And I just want to read you a little bit of Mastermind's Criminal Destiny. Okay. Tori tosses the nozzle out the window, and we watch the hose unroll down the side of the building. But instead of dropping all the way to the alley, the length plays out, and the nozzle hangs there, 10 feet off the ground. We're short, I report. Malik is furious. Didn't you bother to make sure the rope was long enough? Well, let's have to climb down as far as we can and jump the rest of the way, Tori decides. I don't know, I say nervously. With a drop like that, at least one of us is bound to sprain an ankle. If that cop chases us, we'll be dead meat. If we don't get out of here now, we're dead meat anyway, Amber argues. Tori leans over the sash. See that dumpster off to the left? When you get to the bottom of the hose, try to swing toward it. At least it's a soft landing. The cop is knocking again. Hurry up, Amber. Doctor's waiting. I'll go first. I scramble out the window, clinging to the fabric of the hose. I don't know what's worse, the climb itself or the fear that the slightest slip will leave me dashed to pieces on the pavement. The simple act of letting go to lower myself is a stomach-churning terror. To make matters worse, every time I bounce back to the wall, the rough brick rips my knuckles to shreds. When I finally reach the dangling nozzle, it's a shock how far up I still am, and an even bigger shock how far away the dumpster is. Tori mouths a single word, swing. I wriggle my body in an attempt to get the hose in motion. Sometime today would be nice, comes from above, Malik. It's no use. I'm swaying a little, but the dumpster still looks out of range. I'm going to have to leap for it. I extend my legs like a trapeze artist and fling myself at the dumpster. For an instant, I'm in midair, uncoupled from the earth, falling. Then I'm rolling in the garbage. It's not the softest impact, but it's softer than pavement. I lurch to a stop with my face in a half-eaten pizza, disturbing a squadron of flies. I get up, battered but not broken, to see Tori headed down the hose, moving with an ease and skill I could never match. In no time at all, she's at the bottom, swinging out over the dumpster. She lands on her feet beside me. High above, Malik throws a leg out the window and begins his descent. Malik is the strongest of us, but he's also carrying the most weight. Why is he going so slow? Tori murmurs under her breath. Maybe he's afraid of breaking every bone in his body, I tell her. I know I was. And then he's crashing into the dumpster beside us, practically bowling us over. He rolls in the trash, groaning. It stinks in here. What do you expect the garbage to smell like, I retort. Roses? Now Amber's on the way down, her arms working like pistons. Her expression is wild as she mouths an urgent message. Doing fine, Tori calls. A minute later, the cause of her distress becomes clear. The cop is leaning out the window. He takes in the sight of Amber on the hose and us in the dumpster and bellows, freeze! And when we don't freeze, he does something even Tori hasn't anticipated. He grips ham-like hands on the fire hose and begins yanking Amber up. Jump, yells Tori. Amber's petrified. It's too high. We'll catch you, I promise. She's at least 20 feet up when she kicks towards us. The cop stops pulling. Don't do it, kid. Too late. Amber lets go. It's almost a swan dive. We scramble to guess the point of impact because she's going to snap her neck if we don't catch her. She screams all the way. We'll be crushed like bugs if she lands on us, but she'll be crushed if we just let her drop. We reach up, and suddenly she's there, coming down between us. We each get a hand on her before the force of her fall slams the four of us to the refuse of the dumpster. Amber, Tori's frantic. Are you okay? I think so. She sits up in the trash, moving all her limbs. Kid? Comes an anxious voice from above. It's the cop, more anxious than mad. It's a good news, bad news kind of thing. Good that nobody's hurt. But then he disappears, which can only mean one thing. He's coming after us. Anyway, it's a little bit of mastermind criminal. So we've got some time. If you guys have any questions, or if there's anything I didn't talk about that you want me to, let's do it. Yes. Wow, that's a good question. If I could do a crossover series between any two series that I've worked on, what would it be? Gee, that would be it's kind of hard. Yeah, I would love to put like the Masterminds characters into 39 Clues. That might be kind of cool. You sort of want the realism of the series to match. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to take something like hypnotism and then add it to like Everest. You know, like you're hypnotizing people on the summit ridge of Mount Everest. Like the reality doesn't kind of work. So you would need to find a match in that kind of willing suspension of disbelief for the series. Yes. Do my kids read my books? They all have at some point. You know, my older son is kind of put them aside. My daughter still occasionally, and my younger son is really getting into them now. But at some point, all my kids have been sort of readers. But it's funny, they like different books. You know, like my older son loved the adventure series. You know, my daughter was more a fan of stuff like Schooled and No More Dead Dogs and Ungifted. And my younger son, he likes the funniest kind of stuff. Oh, did I live anywhere else before I moved to New York? Yeah, I was born in Canada, so I was born in Montreal, and I lived in Montreal till I was 7. Moved to Toronto. I was in Toronto through the end of high school and came to America to go to NYU, and that's how I ended up in New York. Yes? Oh, great question. What is my favorite genre to write? I mean, like humor and adventure are kind of my two things, and everything I write kind of has a combination of the two. You know, I really love them both. If you really forced me to choose, I would sort of say humor. Not because I like it so much better, but I've always done it. Like when I was 2 years old, the cartoons on TV that were my favorites were the ones that made me laugh. You know, so I've always been into humor and comedy. Yes, in the back. Who is my favorite author? I love Michael Chabon's books. I'm a Jonathan Franzen fan. In kids' books, I love Jack Gantos, Jerry Spinelli, Harry Potter fan back in the day. And I said this to the other group. When you guys were a little bit younger, did you read Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume? Believe it or not, I was in fourth grade the year that book came out. I remember reading it, and I guess I never read a middle grade book before. I was like, I can't believe they've written a book just for people like me. And I just love those old school middle grade novels, old Judy Blume, old Beverly Cleary, who's turning like 100 this week, by the way. Did you hear that? I think that when I got that 7th grade project, I could have written anything, but I wrote like a kind of classic middle grade novel just because I liked them so much.
What's the book or series you're the proudest of?
Which book or series am I the proudest of? I don't know. I love the way Masterminds is coming out, but I was very proud of Hypnotist just because I'd never written anything paranormal before that. All my books were realistic fiction. Masterminds, I guess you'd say it's realistic. I mean, cloning is real, right? You're not supposed to clone humans, but you probably could. Like back in the early 2000s, someone cloned a sheep, right? And if you could clone a whole sheep, you could definitely clone a person. It's just nobody does it because A, it's against the law, and B, it's just kind of weird to start manufacturing your own people. So even compared to Masterminds, I think that Hypnotist was taking that reality a step further into the fantasy realm, which I'd never done before. I'm pretty proud of pulling that off. Yes?
Can you tell us how you published your first book? How do you publish your book now?
Oh, okay. So that's actually a really good and very practical question. So nowadays I have way more experience, and the publishers all know me, right? So I have what you call like a literary agent, who's kind of like my representative. So all my contracts are negotiated by an agent with the publisher, and when I get an idea, I phone up one of my editors. I publish with HarperCollins and Scholastic, so I have 2 different editors. So I'll call one of my editors and sort of say, listen, I've got a great idea for this book. What do you think? I'll tell them what it is, or her. And they'll either say one of 3 things. Either I love it, or I don't think that's kind of the thing you should be spending your time on. Or, yes, but I think it needs to be developed a little bit further. And in which case I'll sort of work on it. And then when I get the idea to the point where it's ready to get put under contract, my editor will say, write up a proposal. And a proposal is like a few-page outline of just what the book is going to be like. My 2 editors like it differently. Like my Harper editor prefers like character sketches and talking about what the people are like. My Scholastic editor is more plot-driven. He wants, exactly what's going to happen. And then the contract gets signed based on that, and then I write the book. Yes? Oh, okay, that's a great question. Do I read my own books once they come out? I do, but I wait a few years. And the reason is, I think, I'm sure you guys do in your own writing, like the whole process with like the revision and rewriting, and there's a lot of that when a book comes out. So by the time a book is published, you're so overexposed to it. None of the jokes are funny, nothing's surprising. So I usually put a book aside for a few years before reading it once it's been published. Yes? In the corner there? Yeah. Oh, how old was I when I wrote Mastermind's Criminal Destiny? Like 51. Yeah, like Mastermind's Criminal Destiny just came out in February. So the Mastermind stuff is all new, right? The books that I wrote when I was in middle school and high school aren't that well known anymore. Like McDonald Hall, The Bruno and Boots, I Want to Go Home. You can see them sometimes, and you can still buy. I mean, they don't have it out there, but you'll sometimes see This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall in a store. But this is kind of weird, though. My very second book is called Go Jump in the Pool. I wrote it when I was about 13 and a half. It came out, I mean, I wrote it before the first book even came out, but Go Jump in the Pool was just made into a movie for Canadian TV. So here's this thing that I wrote when I was a kid that's suddenly like all over TV in Canada. Keep an eye out, because I think it'll be available in the United States like in the fall at some point. So even the really old stuff, you never know that an idea might come back and turn into something. Yes? A great question. How long does it take? On average, 4 to 6 months to write one book. First draft of one.
How long does it take to get it published?
Oh, so the question is, 4 to 6 months to write it, how long does it take to come out? I would say anywhere between, you've got the book exactly the way you want it to be, anywhere between 9 months and a year and a half. Yeah, that's usually the slowest part, is having it actually published. Yes? Have I ever felt like
Quitting.
Oh, like quitting? I guess so. I mean, but I think that, look, I do this so much, right? I do this every single day. You guys wake up every day and go to school. I mean, there are days you don't feel like, I don't feel like going to school today, right? And there are days your teachers wake up and say, I don't feel like teaching today. And there are also days that LeBron James wakes up and says, another basketball game? Are you kidding me? We did that yesterday. That doesn't mean he hates basketball. It means when you do something full time, it's going to get on your nerves sometimes. That's how it is with me in writing. I love writing, but I do so much of it that you get that feeling of, I'm a little overwhelmed by this. I'd love to take a break. It doesn't mean that I want to quit. It's just natural. That's just the way everybody is with their job. Yes? Okay, so I didn't quite get that. How many of my characters? Oh, okay. So you mean like, how many of my characters have like a disability or something like that? I mean, it's an occasional thing in my books. There's a certain, like in Dive, I wrote a series called Dive about scuba diving kids, and there's one girl who is actually physically handicapped, but she has cerebral palsy, so when she walks, she limps and is somewhat limited, but when she dives in water, she is 100 times better than the other divers. I think that, characters like Noah Eucalyptus have kind of, like autistic spectrum kind of situations going on in their lives. But I have never written a book entirely centering on like a special needs situation like that. Okay, who's not had a chance to ask any? How about right there?
Do you have any books you regret?
Do I have any books that I regret writing? I really don't, but that said, I mean, some of the books that I wrote as a really young kid, like as a middle school kid and in high school, if I was writing them today, I would write them so completely differently. So it's not a regret exactly, but they almost feel like they were written by somebody else who was making completely different decisions than the decisions that I would make if I were writing those stories today. Does that make sense? Okay, well, I know many of you have books that you would like to get signed. We do have books available as well. But while I've got everybody together Thank you so much for giving me the chance to come and ask questions. Thank you.
All right, so one more game of round of applause.
Yay.
And thank you guys for being a great audience. Really great questions. So thank you very much. So here's what I'm going to